So you're probably wondering what took so long between this video and the last video. And you're probably wondering why I'm sitting in a completely different spot. Well, the reason is, for the lull, is I got sick, and then the holidays, and then when I did try to do an update, um, I don't know, but my computer started making an unholy noise around the 4 minute mark. And it was like I'd be reading, and then suddenly, 4 minutes in, it would make this weird noise. And I'll try to take a video of it later on so that maybe somebody will see it and maybe somebody will know how to tell me how to fix it so I can do it on my computer and not my mother's computer. I'm doing it on her computer right now. But anyway, in any case, I can't think of any warnings for this chapter. And um again, if I missed something, point it out to me so I can remember to warn for it beforehand. Um, in any case, without much further ado, let's begin with Chapter 12, A Talk on the Tide. It was a bizarre journey for Candy. For John Mischief, too, she suspected. Even though the noise of the sea and the slap of the sea skipper's feet on the waters prevented them from conversing, Mischief and his brothers would occasionally erupt in laughter, as though they were revisiting their recent adventures, and were suddenly hugely amused by the fact that it was ending in this comfortable but faintly absurd fashion. For her part, Candy found the rhythm of the travel quite relaxing after a while, and was so lulled that she let her eyes close. Sleep quickly overtook her strangely fatigued body. When she opened her eyes an hour and 20 minutes later, according to her watch, the sky was darkening overhead. She was by habit a great sky watcher, and she knew the names of many of the stars and constellations. But though a sprinkling of stars had appeared as the darkness deepened, she found she could recognize none of the configurations ranged above her. At first she assumed she was simply looking at the sky from a different angle, and so was failing to recognize what was in fact a perfectly obvious constellation. But as she continued to study the heavens as they darkened to night, an unnatural night by Minnesotan standards, it was barely 2 in the afternoon, she realized that she was not mistaken. There were no recognizable arrangement of stars up there. This was not the same heaven that hung over Minnesota. For some reason she found this much more disquieting than the fact of the Sea of Isabella appearing from nowhere, or the prospect of some hitherto unvisited archipelago of islands awaiting her somewhere ahead. She had assumed, naively perhaps, that at least the stars would be constant. After all, hadn't the same stars she knew by name hung over all the other fantastic worlds that had existed on Earth? Over Atlantis, over El Dorado, over Avalon? How could something so eternal, so immutable, be so altered? It distressed her, and yes, it made her a little afraid of what lay ahead. Apparently the Abarat wasn't just another part of the planet she knew, simply hidden from the sight of ordinary eyes. It was a different world entirely. Perhaps it had different religions, different ideas about good and evil, about what was real and what wasn't. But it was too late to turn her back on all of this. After all, something here had called her, hadn't it? Wasn't that why she'd been drawing on her workbook the same design she'd found on the ball in the lighthouse? Because for some urgent reason the ball had been sending out a portion of its power, as power to summon seas, and her mind had been ready to receive it? She'd done so without any conscious thought, drawn and redrawn the design in a dreamy state. She'd even walked away from the principal's office without giving what she was doing any deep thought, simply going where her feet and her instincts had led her. Though this had all looked accidental at the time, perhaps none of it was. Perhaps, as Tropilla had said, Candy had business in the Abarat. Was it possible? She was just a schoolgirl from Chickentown. What business could she have in a world she hadn't even seen? But then, was the idea any less likely than the fact that the sky over her head was now filled with stars from the heavens of another universe? Even the darkness between those stars, the darkness of space itself, was not like the space as she saw it from her bedroom window. There were subtle colors pulsing through it, shades of deepest purple and rich royal blue, moving like tides across the sky, ready to be swum or sailed. In the time that she'd been turning all these wild ideas over, the Sea of Isabella had quieted down considerably. The waters were virtually flat now, and the step of the sea skippers more hushed because it was easier going. It was even possible for Candy and the Johns to chat normally, as their bearers skipped side by side.
"We're moving through the ring of darkness right now,"
John Drowse explained.
"That light you see ahead of us."
Candy had not seen any light before, but now that it was pointed out, she saw a distinct paling of the sky close to the horizon.
"A light at Ifrit."
"One of the unfettered islands," Sallow broke in to add. "What does that mean?"
"It means they govern themselves," said John Slop.
"They don't pay taxes to the Abaratian government, nor are they part of the Comexco Company."
"Oh, don't get political on us, Slop,"
John Drowse complained. "I just wanted her to understand the complexities of—" "Nobody understands the complexities of the islands anymore," John Mischief said despairingly. "It used to be so simple. You had the islands of night and the islands of day." "And almost constant war," John Serpent interjected. "At least everybody knew where they stood. You had your allegiances and you lived and died by them. But now—" He made a noise of profound disgust. "Now who knows?"
"Oh, do stop,"
said John Drowse wearily. If there was more to be said on the subject, and undoubtedly there was, nobody got to say it, because at that moment Pucks whispered, "Quiet, everyone." "What's the problem?" said Serpent. "Look up." Everybody turned their gazes skyward. There were dark forms, like those of huge birds, the bodies of men, circling around, blotting out the stars. "Glitters," said Dox. "They won't touch us," Sallow opined. "Maybe not," said Pucks. "But if they see us, they can report us to Inflexia Gruskin. We're in her waters." Candy didn't ask for the details on Inflixia Gruskin. The name was descriptive enough. "Are you going under the Gillyholly Bridge?" Mischief whispered. "It's the quickest way," said Tropella. "And we're all getting tired. Trust us. We know what we are doing." Mischief duly fell silent. By degrees the travelers approached the bridge in question, which spanned perhaps half a mile's width of glacial water between two islands. On one side the light was still embryonic, barely delineating the shapes of the cliffs and the immense buildings that were perched on top of them. On the other side the light was noticeably brighter. Candy could see a temple of some kind, or perhaps the ruins of a temple, and beside it a row of pillars. One of the creatures Pucks had referred to as Vlitters swooped down and skimmed along the shining water, its lower jaw cutting through the reflection of the starlit heavens. Candy caught only a glimpse as it died, skimmed and rose again. It was an odd-looking beast, a cross between a bat and a human being. Though it had failed to see the sea skippers and their passengers, the Vlitter did see something edible. It scooped up a fish the size of a baby, which let out a furious, dog-like yelping as it was taken, and continued to yelp until the litter consumed it, mercifully somewhere too high up to be seen. They moved on, with the yelping of the doomed dogfish still echoing off the walls and the temples and the cliffs, away from the calm waters beneath the bridge. The sea became steadily rougher as they cleared the protection of the islands, and Candy was glad for all their sakes that the journey's end was close at hand. What would she have done, she wondered, if she hadn't the good fortune to meet the card players at their game? She would surely have drowned, despite all that Mischief had told her about relying on the kind arms of Mamma Isabella. They moved off to the left now, and what Candy saw ahead was yet another puzzlement. The sky, which had seemed to be growing lighter, was darkening once again. There was an immense bank of blue-gray mist filling the panorama ahead of them, and there were more stars showing through the mist. No doubt of it, the glimpse of day she'd seen had only been that, a glimpse. Now night was approaching again. The sight of this murky vista was clearly a welcome one for the sea skippers. Pucks was so happy he broke out into song as he skipped. The ditty was sung to the familiar tune of "O Christmas Tree," but the words were unexpected. "Oh, woe is me, oh, woe is me, I used to have a hamster tree, but it was eaten by a newt, and now I have no goodly fruit. Oh, woe is me, oh, woe is me, I used to have a hamster tree." "You like my song?" Puck said when he was done. "It wasn't quite what I was expecting," Candy said. "But yes, it was certainly, unusual." "I'll teach it to you," Puck said. "Then you'll have something to sing as you go around the Yebba-Dim Day, and people will think, oh, she's one of us." "Is this a very well-known song?" "Believe it or not," said John Serpent, his expression one of profound distaste. As usual, "Yes." "Then I should learn it," Candy said, secretly glad to be causing the condescending John Serpent a little discomfort. "So," said John Mischief, "from the top. All together now?" Everybody joined in with the song this time, except Serpent and Moot, and Candy quickly picked it up. By the time they came to the fourth rendition, Puck said, "This time a solo from Miss Quackenbush." "Oh no." When they say the great head of Yebba-Dim-Day, they are being serious. "Oh, yes," said Doxtox. "We've carried you all this way. The least you can do is sing us a song." It was a reasonable request, so Candy sang out her first Abaratian song as the mist ahead began to thin, and they skipped their way into the Straits of Dusk. "Nice, very nice," said Pucks when she was done. "Now I'll teach you another." "No, I think one's enough for now. Maybe another time." "I don't imagine there will be another time," said Jopella. "We very rarely come into the shipping routes. It's not safe. If we go to sleep on the waves, we risk getting mown down by a ferry. That's why we head out back to the Ring of Darkness. It's safer there." "Don't be so sure you won't meet this lady again," Mischief said to the company. "I believe she's in your lives forever now, and we're in hers. There are some people, you know, who are too important to ever be forgotten. I think she's one of them." Candy smiled. It was a sweet speech, even if she didn't quite believe it. Nobody seemed to know what to say when Mischief had finished, so there was just a thoughtful silence for a minute or two as the mists ahead them continued to part. "Ah," said John Sallow, "I do believe I see the Yabba-dim-day." The last scraps of the mist parted now, and their destination came into view. It was not an island in any sense that Candy understood the word. It seemed to be a huge stone and metal head, with towers built on top of its cranium, all filled with pinprick windows, from which beams of light emerged to pierce the mist. "Set your watch to 8, Mischief said to Candy. "I don't understand," Candy said. "One minute it looks like it's dawn, the next it's night. Now you're saying to set my watch to 8 o'clock." "That's because we're now in the Straits of Dusk," said John Sallow, as though the matter were simplicity itself. "It's always 8 in the evening here." Candy looked well and truly confused. "Don't worry," said Dox. "Eventually you'll get the knack of it. For now, just go with the flow. It's easier that way." While Candy set her watch to 8 o'clock, the sea skippers brought them around to the immense head of the Yabba-dim-day. A steep staircase ran like a vein up the side of the place, and more light poured from a host of windows and doors. There was a great riotous commotion coming out of the head, and the din of voices shouting and singing and crying and laughing, all echoing across the water. "So, lady," said Dox, "here we are." The sea skippers brought them to a tiny harbor in the nook where the Titan's chest met his arm. There were a number of small red boats in the harbor, many of which were in the process of entering or leaving, and a sizable crowd on the quayside. The entrance of the 4 sea skippers, along with their passengers, caused a good deal of confusion and comment. Very soon people were appearing from inside the great head to see what all the brouhaha was about. Among these newcomers were several people in uniforms. "Police!" said John Sallow sharply. The word was echoed among his brothers. "Police!
Police!
Police!" Mischief turned to Candy and swiftly caught hold of her arm. "So quickly," he said. "What do you mean?" "I have to go. So quickly." "Because of the police?" "Keep your voice down," said John Serpent, his usual charmless self. "Hush!" Mischief said to him. "Don't you ever talk to my lady that way again." "Your lady," Serpent snorted, as though in these final snatched moments he wanted to express his contempt for Mischief's respectful handling of Candy. But there was no time, not for Serpent, nor for Mischief, not even for Candy to say more than a hurried "Goodbye." The police were coming down the dock, parting the crowd as they advanced. Candy doubted that they'd recognize the criminals yet, though Mischief's antlers made him exceptionally easy to spot. But they were interested in these new arrivals, and Mischief wasn't going to allow their general curiosity to turn into an arrest scene.
"Do you have a permit for those sea skippers?"
one of the policemen hollered.
"This is where we part, lady," Mischief said. "We'll meet again, I know we will."
He took her hand, turned it over, and lightly kissed the palm. Then he jumped into the water. "Hey, you!" a second policeman yelled, barging through the crowd to make his way to the end of the quayside. "It's him!" he yelled. "Oh, no," Candy heard Dox said. "This is a pleasant introduction to the Yabba-dim-day." "We should have gone to Speckled View," said Tropella. "It would have been a sight quieter." "Well, it's too late now," said Pucks. "He's getting away!" the second policeman was shouting. "Who?" came the reply from one of his companions. "What's his name? The man who cleared out Malleus's nice house in Tasmagor. Him! What's his face?" He was steadily becoming redder and redder as his frustration mounted. "The master criminal!" At which point about 7 people in the crowd said, "John Mischief!" at the same time. "Yeah, that's what I said," the policeman replied lamely. "John Mischief!" Now all eyes, both those of the crowd and of the officers, were fixated on the patch of turbulent water where John Mischief had last been seen. One of the policemen, a huge blue-skinned man with a square-cut orange beard, now attempted to commandeer one of the faster-looking boats in the little harbor, apparently intending to give chase in it. But its owner, who was almost as big as the officer, had quite the advantage of being 6 or 7 yards away across a span of grimy dock water. Wasn't playing.
You! Get that boat over here! The officer yelled.
The man deliberately neglected to look in the officer's direction and proceeded to maneuver his vessel out through the knot of boats. Clearly the idea of losing his precious boat to a belligerent officer with more testosterone than sea sense had made him nervous. The attempted retreat enraged the officer even more.
"Come back!" he yelled. "Your vessel is commandeered!"
"Let it be, Branks!" one of the other officers yelled.
"There are plenty of other boats."
But Officer Branks wasn't going to have his authority disregarded. Pulling off his jacket and boots, he jumped into the dirty water and began to swim toward the retreating vessel, yelling as he went.
"You bring that boat right back here! Do you hear me? Right back here!"
His absurd behavior had troubled the crowd on the dock. The wooden structure was creaking, sending up a warning to those perched on it that it would not be wise to perch there much longer. The warning was, however, ignored, and the noisier the crowd became, the more people emerged from the great head to see what was going on.
"You know, Candy," Tropilla said, "I don't want another hurried goodbye, but if I'm going to go without being noticed, this would be a smart time to do it. Don't you agree?"
"Absolutely," Candy said. Everybody's attention was on the swimming policeman, who had managed to reach the escapee in the boat and had hauled himself on board, where, despite cries from his fellow officers that he should desist, he proceeded to harangue the boat owner, who promptly hit the policeman with an oar. The oar broke, and Officer Branks toppled over the edge of the boat like a silent comedian, sinking into the filthy water. Consternation. Now it was the boat owner who dived in to drag the unconscious man up out of the water, mindful, no doubt, of what the penalty would be if the overzealous officer drowned. The dowsing had shocked policeman Branks out of his unconscious state, however, and as soon as he surfaced, the altercation began afresh. The two men struggled and flailed in the water for a while, during which time Candy, having exchanged the very briefest of farewells with the sea skippers, slipped away through the crowd toward the door of the Yeba Dimday. As she went, she glanced over her shoulder, so as to have one last glimpse of her friends to fix in her head, just in case Mischief was overly optimistic in his beliefs, and none of them ever met again. But Mischief had long gone, and all 4 sea skippers had already leaped into the water and dived down under the boats, so as to escape the harbor undetected. Candy experienced a sudden and acute sense of loss. She felt utterly and painfully alone. Without John Mischief, how would she get by in this strange world? It wasn't that she felt the need to turn around and go home. There was nothing for her back in Chicken Town, or at least nothing that she wanted. She hated her father, and her mother, well, she just made her feel empty. No, there was nothing for her there. But coming here, entering this strange new world, was like being born again. A new life under new stars. So it was with a curious mingling of anticipation and heavy heart that she pressed against the flow of the crowd and eventually brought herself through the door and into the city that stood on the Straits of Dusk. And that was chapter 12. Hopefully I'll be able to do chapter 13 soon. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any advice or any suggestions, leave a comment. A like is always appreciated. And I hope you have a good day.